Sloane flashed me a mocking little smirk. "Oh, come on, Vivian, it's just temporary," she said, right after declaring my house had so much extra space. I stared right back at her, deadpan. "That's exactly what you said when you moved in with us 4 years ago." My son, Caleb, suddenly found the hardwood floor incredibly interesting. The last time we opened that door to them, what was supposed to be a quick month morphed into a year of sky-high utility bills and my home functioning as Sloane's personal walk-in closet. But now, as a 65-year-old widow, the rules were strictly mine to make. "Mom, the guest room is literally sitting empty," Caleb insisted, lugging 2 massive suitcases into the foyer. I shook my head. "That room is for my hobbies. If you two need a roof over your heads, you can use the storage room at the end of the hall. It has a twin bed and a window. Perfect for a short stay." Sloane's smug smile vanished instantly. Before either of them could utter a word of complaint, I turned on my heel and headed for the kitchen. There would be no debate this time. I was the absolute queen of my castle, down to the very last square inch. The next morning, I was up at 6:30. I brewed my black coffee, toasted a single slice of sourdough, and sat down at the kitchen island to soak in the morning silence. It was my daily ritual of peace. It was pushing 10 o'clock when Sloane finally wandered into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes and wearing a sweeping silk robe that completely contradicted her narrative of desperate financial hardship. "I am starving," she muttered, yanking the fridge open. Her face immediately scrunched up. "Wait, there's no almond milk. You didn't make eggs. Caleb said you make these amazing Sunday-style breakfasts." I took a slow sip of my dark roast. "I made those when Caleb was 12. Nowadays, I only cook for myself. There's a Trader Joe's about 3 blocks down the street." She crossed her arms, deeply offended. "Are we seriously supposed to go grocery shopping on an empty stomach? You're independent adults. I assume you can manage." I replied with absolute calm. I stood up, washed my 1 coffee mug, dried it, and put it away in the cupboard. I grabbed my straw sun hat and walked out to the garden. If Sloane was expecting a free bed and breakfast experience, she had seriously misread the room. By day 3, Sloane's silent invasion had officially begun. My living room, which I always kept immaculate, started accumulating landmines of clutter. Half-empty mugs of lukewarm coffee on the coasters. Glossy fashion magazines fanned out across the coffee table. 3 different pairs of her shoes discarded by the entryway. One afternoon, I came downstairs with a book, only to find her sprawled out across my leather recliner, blasting a trashy reality TV show at top volume. She didn't even pretend to reach for the remote when I walked in. "Hope you don't mind, Vivian," she said, her eyes glued to the screen. "It's really the only place in the house where you can get completely comfortable. That little room you gave us is a total oven." I gave a curt nod. "It's true. This sofa is incredibly comfortable." I didn't say another word. I just turned around and went back upstairs to my bedroom. The very next day, the moment Caleb and Sloane left to run errands, I called a local junk hauling and moving crew. In less than 30 minutes, they unmounted the massive smart TV from the wall and hauled away the leather recliner. In their place, I arranged 2 beautiful, rustic wooden armchairs stunning to look at, but notoriously stiff, along with a delicate little tea table. I had been meaning to give the room a minimalist aesthetic for months anyway. When they got back that evening, Sloane's dramatic gasp echoed down the hallway. "Caleb, get in here right now," she shrieked. I strolled out of the kitchen, calmly drying my hands on a dish towel. Caleb was staring at the empty wall, his eyes wide. "Mom, what happened to the furniture were we robbed?" I smiled serenely. "Not at all. I just felt the room was getting entirely too cluttered. I sold the TV on Marketplace and donated the recliner. The space flows so much better now. Don't you think it's absolutely perfect for quiet reading? Sloane's hands curled into tight fists, her face flushed with barely contained fury. But that was where I relaxed in the afternoons. How could you just get rid of it without asking us? I looked her dead in the eye, my voice never losing its even, pleasant tone. Sloane, this is my house. I don't run my interior design choices by house guests. If you're looking for flat screens and plush leather sectionals, I'm highly confident you two will find a gorgeous apartment to rent very soon. Losing her prime lounging spot was a heavy blow to Sloane's afternoons. But her instinct to conquer territory didn't fade. Realizing the living room was a lost cause, she set her sights on my art studio, a beautiful, sunlit room on the first floor where I kept my sewing machine, canvases, and watercolors. One Thursday morning, I noticed the studio door was cracked open. I peeked inside and found that Sloane had dragged 2 of her massive, rolling suitcases into the room. She had completely cleared off one of my drafting tables to set up a massive, lighted vanity mirror and her sprawling makeup collection. She was casually brushing her hair as if she owned the place. The bathroom is just way too humid to do my hair," she offered defensively the second she saw me in the doorway. "Besides, you barely even use this room in the mornings. Sharing is caring, right?" I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. "Understood," I said simply, and gently pulled the door shut. That afternoon, while she was out dragging Caleb to some appointment, I took a walk down to Mr. Henderson's hardware store on Main Street. I bought a heavy-duty, high-grade deadbolt. I didn't need to hire a handyman. Decades of maintaining a house on my own had taught me exactly how to handle a power drill. 40 minutes later, the new lock was perfectly installed. I gathered all of Sloane's makeup and hair tools, packed them neatly into her suitcases, and wheeled them out into the hallway, right next to the small storage room. When she returned and tried to casually stroll into the studio, the heavy brass knob didn't budge. I heard the frantic metallic rattling, followed by her angry, stomping footsteps heading out to the backyard, where I was happily pruning my rose bushes. "Vivian, the studio door is stuck, and all my stuff is sitting out in the hall," she snapped, visibly unraveling. I cleanly snipped a dead branch with my shears. "It's not stuck. I changed the locks. That is my private workspace, and it is not open for public use. Your bags are exactly where they belong." "This is unbelievable. You treat me like a total stranger," she spat. I took off my gardening gloves and faced her. "You are an adult temporarily crashing in my home. Strangers do not get keys to the front door. Be grateful for the roof over your head. Sloane." Because my boundaries are not up for negotiation. The weekend arrived, bringing the inevitable clash over household finances. Up until then, I had kept my grocery runs incredibly lean, only bringing home what I planned to eat that day. I'd quickly noticed my communal pantry supplies, my good olive oil, my coffee beans. The toilet paper were vanishing at a terrifying speed. Saturday afternoon, Caleb shuffled into the kitchen clutching a long grocery receipt. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking incredibly uncomfortable. "Hey, Mom. So, Sloane did a massive grocery run for the house today. It ended up being pretty expensive. We were thinking, well, since you live here too, it would be fair if you pitched in your share of the cash." I took the receipt he held out and scanned it line by line. It was loaded with imported artisanal cheeses, overpriced bottles of wine, salon-exclusive shampoos, and a whole slew of gourmet snacks that I would never consume in a million years. I handed the slip of paper back without blinking. "I don't eat or use a single thing on this list, Caleb. My diet is remarkably simple. But Mom, he pleaded, we're really trying to save for a down payment. We can't shoulder the entire food budget for the house by ourselves. I walked over to the narrow pantry cabinet next to the oven. I pulled a small brass key from my apron pocket and unlocked the shiny new padlock I had installed that morning. I swung the door open to reveal my personal stash, my olive oil, my coffee, my tea boxes, and my basic dry goods. You're absolutely right. Caleb, you shouldn't be shouldering my expenses. That's why, as of today, our groceries are completely separate. You buy your food, and I will buy mine. I told him, my voice soft but unyielding. And since we're on the topic of household finances, the utility bill arrives on Tuesday. Because there are 2 extra adults taking hot showers and burning electricity all day. We are splitting it 3 ways. I expect your 1/3 share in cash by Wednesday morning. Caleb was stunned into silence. He had fully expected me to buckle under the guilt and open my wallet, just like his father used to do, but those days were long gone. I snapped the padlock shut, dropped the key back into my pocket, and went back to chopping vegetables. Caleb turned around and walked out of the kitchen without another word. If there was one thing Sloane despised more than my boundaries, it was cleaning up after herself. By the second week, her new strategy was clear. Wear down my patience by leaving petty traps of mess all over the house. I knew the game. It was a classic passive-aggressive power play designed to establish dominance and force me back into the caretaker role. I wasn't going to take the bait. On a Wednesday morning, the sink was entirely barricaded by a mountain of greasy skillets and crusted plates from whatever late-night meal she'd cooked. On top of that, she had left her damp, makeup-stained bath towels crumpled in a heap on the downstairs vanity. I didn't lose my temper. I walked to the laundry room and grabbed a heavy-duty plastic utility basket. Calmly and methodically, I placed every single dirty plate, the crusty forks, and the oil-slicked frying pan into the basket. I swung by the bathroom and tossed her damp towels right on top of the pile. I carried the basket down the hall to the storage room. The door was unlocked. I walked right in and dumped the entire basket dead in the center of Sloane's bed, right on top of her precious pastel duvet cover. I grabbed my purse, drove across town, and enjoyed a lovely, long latte with my friend Joanne at our favorite cafe. When I got back a few hours later, the air in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sloane was pacing the hallway, absolutely fuming. "You put pans full of grease on my bed," she screamed the second I walked in. I took my time hanging up my coat. "I returned your belongings to your personal space. If you leave things scattered in the common areas, I can only assume it's because you forgot to put them away in your room. I was just doing you a favor by carrying them back." "You are insane. You could have just washed them or asked me to do it," she yelled, throwing her hands in the air. "I am not your maid. Sloane, if a dish is yours, you wash it. If you abandon it, I return it to you. It's a very simple system." I gave her a polite, tight-lipped smile, walked into my art studio, and locked the deadbolt behind me. Sloane was desperate for an audience to validate her. On a Friday afternoon, without a word of warning, she invited 3 of her friends over for drinks. I could hear their shrill laughter echoing from the foyer. They had entirely taken over the kitchen and living room, draping expensive leather bags and designer jackets over every available surface. When I walked out, I saw Sloane pouring wine into my good crystal stemware, playing the role of the gracious hostess in a house she didn't own. When she spotted me, her smile froze, but she quickly pivoted, trying to play the sweet daughter-in-law card in front of her audience. "Oh, Vivian, so glad you're down here. Girls, this is Caleb's mom. She's doing us a huge favor letting us crash here while we close on our own big place." The women looked me up and down, clearly expecting me to politely excuse myself and fade into the background like the invisible, compliant mother-in-law. Instead, I walked straight to the hall closet and pulled out my heavy gardening boots, which were absolutely caked in thick, dried mud from the recent rain. I grabbed a stack of old newspapers and a stiff wire scrub brush. I walked right into the center of the living room, sat down on the floor, and spread the newspaper out at their feet. I started viciously scrubbing the dried mud. The harsh, scratching sound of the wire bristles against the dirt was incredibly loud. Tiny flecks of dry soil and dust began floating into the air, settling near their pristine outfits. "What in the world are you doing?" Sloane asked, horrified, instinctively covering her wine glass with her hand to protect it from the dust. "Cleaning my boots. Sweetheart, the garden soil is terribly muddy this time of year," I replied cheerfully, scrubbing even harder. "Please, keep chatting. Don't let me interrupt. Oh, and by the way, Sloane, make sure you thoroughly hand-wash those crystal glasses tonight. Red wine permanently stains them if they sit in the sink." Her friends exchanged incredibly uncomfortable glances. The flying dirt, the scratching noise, and my absolute refusal to leave completely shattered the illusion that Sloane was the lady of the manor. Within 15 minutes, the women were awkwardly checking their Apple Watches and mumbling excuses about traffic. They grabbed their bags and practically sprinted for the door. Sloane shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred as she slammed the front door behind them. I just kept brushing my boots, humming a soft, happy tune. The house was blissfully quiet again. The end of the month arrived, and it was time to settle up. I had kept meticulous track of the household usage. I had repeatedly warned Caleb about the electricity, but Sloane had completely ignored me. She left lights blazing in empty rooms and, despite the fact that the weather was quite mild, she ran a high-wattage space heater in their bedroom all night. Every night. When the power bill arrived in the mail, I wasn't shocked to see the total was $285 more than double what I typically paid living alone. That evening, while we were all in the kitchen making our separate dinners, I slapped the utility bill face up on the counter right in front of Caleb. Next to the paper, I placed exactly $95 in cash, my 1/3 share. "The power bill is here," I announced, pouring myself a glass of ice water. "My cut is on the table. You two are on the hook for the remaining 2/3. It's due Friday." Caleb picked up the bill, his eyes bulging at the total. "Mom, this is over $190. We don't have that kind of cash to spare right now. We're bleeding money this month." "Comfort isn't free." "Caleb," I said, checking my roasting vegetables in the oven. "Sloane's space heater eats electricity." Sloane slammed her hand flat against the kitchen island. "Because our room is freezing. If you hadn't been so selfish and just let us have the guest room, which is actually insulated, we wouldn't need the heater." I looked at her, entirely unfazed. "The thermostat in this house is set to a standard temperature. If you cannot afford the overhead costs of living here, perhaps you should look into renting a smaller studio apartment that fits your actual budget." "You're our family," my son yelled, desperately trying to pull at my heartstrings. "You're supposed to help us. It's just for a little while longer." I wiped my hands on a towel. "Supporting you does not mean I am obligated to subsidize your luxury or your negligence. You chose to move in here to save money. If you blow your cash on imported cheese and wine instead of your utility bills, that is a budgeting failure on your part, not mine. If I do not have the remaining cash in my hand by Friday morning, I am flipping the circuit breaker to your wing of the house. Have a good night." I walked upstairs, leaving the two of them standing in stunned, panicked silence. I wasn't going to argue. There would only be consequences. The tension completely boiled over the very next morning. Sloane, absolutely exhausted from slamming into my boundaries, decided to call my bluff. She firmly believed that, like a traditional, soft-hearted mother, I would immediately cave to the threat of losing my son. She cornered me in the hallway, arms crossed, face flushed with anger. "I have had it with you. Vivian," she shrieked, making sure her voice carried to Caleb in the kitchen. "You nickel and dime us. You humiliate me in front of my friends, and you treat us like garbage. I demand that you let us move into the master bedroom today, or Caleb and I are packing our bags and leaving right now." Caleb walked into the hall, looking pale and terrified. "Sloane, come on. Don't do this. Mom, let's just talk about it." I didn't even blink. I let her shrill threat hang in the quiet air of the hallway. Without saying a single word, I walked straight past her to the hall closet. I grabbed the handles of their two massive suitcases and dragged them right to the center of the foyer, dropping them heavily at her feet. "What are you doing?" Sloane stammered, all the aggressive bravado instantly draining from her face. "I am accepting your terms," I replied, checking my wristwatch with icy detachment. "The master bedroom is mine. You have exactly 45 minutes to pack your belongings and vacate my property. Mom, please. We literally have nowhere else to go," Caleb begged, his voice cracking. "You are grown adults, and Sloane just issued an ultimatum. I am simply honoring it," I stated firmly. I turned my back on them and walked into the kitchen. The game was over. The frantic sound of zippers snapping shut and heavy footsteps rushing up and down the hallway echoed for the next 40 minutes. I sat peacefully at the kitchen table, sipping a hot cup of Earl Grey tea and reading the home and garden section of the newspaper. I felt zero guilt. I felt zero pity. I only felt a profound, crystal clear sense of relief. When they finally dragged their bags to the front door, Caleb turned to look at me. His face was twisted in bitterness. "You're tearing this family apart. Demanding basic respect under your own roof doesn't destroy a family. Caleb, it's time you both learn to stand on your own 2 feet." "Good luck," I replied calmly. The second they crossed the threshold, I shut the heavy oak door. I didn't wait a single minute. I went straight to my utility drawer, grabbed my Phillips head screwdriver, and within 10 minutes, I had completely swapped out the cylinder of the front door's deadbolt. It was a simple, mechanical task, but it sealed my fortress permanently. No old key would ever unlock my door again. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, I walked through my immaculate, quiet house. There were no dirty mugs abandoned on tables. There was no trashy reality TV blaring. There were no inflated utility bills hanging over my head. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a generous glass of my favorite Cabernet, and sat down in my living room, basking in the absolute, beautiful silence of my home. The house was mine again, and my peace of mind was officially off the market. In the end, I learned that family love shouldn't be synonymous with endless, quiet suffering. Sometimes, the healthiest decision you can ever make is to stop setting yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. Establishing boundaries isn't an act of cruelty, nor does it mean you don't care. It is simply a profound act of self-respect. It's not about punishing anyone or winning a war. It's about choosing your own peace. Because once you reclaim your peace of mind and learn how to fiercely protect it, it becomes the safest, most beautiful place you will ever know.